to Concussion Talk podcast. My name is Nick Mercer. I write Concussion Talk, www.concussiontalk.com. This is episode 16, and I'll be talking to Moira Merrithew. Moira is the co-founder of Merrithew, a company whose slogan is Leaders in Mindful Movement. They provide equipment and mind-body education. Part of that education is Pilates for post-rehabilitation. And since Pilates has helped me so much since my injury, since 9 years after my injury actually, I talked to Moira about post-rehabilitation Pilates, mindful movement, and understanding how the body moves. Okay, I'm on the phone with Moira Merrithew, and I will now ask her to introduce herself and talk about her company, and who actually markets themselves as Leaders in Mindful Movement. So, Moira, please go ahead.
Yes, hi there. Yes, I'm Moira Merrithew, and I'm Executive Director of Education and co-founder with my husband Lindsay of Merrithew, Leaders in Mindful Movement. But we got our roots actually in Pilates. Our brand is Stott Pilates, and we've been around since the late 80s.
Wow. Okay, great. Wow, that's so. I mean, so you obviously have a lot of different education courses, such as post rehab, as we talked about last week. We talked on the phone briefly, and you mentioned post rehab Pilates. So, what does that mean to you? What does post rehab mean to you in terms of Pilates?
Well, I'll tell you. Years ago, I used to be a dancer and had to stop because of a chronic injury. And, dancers back then, there was no real conditioning. It was survival of the fittest. So, if you get injured, you're madly trying to get back in shape to get it back on stage, or you don't get a paycheck. Yeah. So I wanted to go back in and actually go back when I stopped dancing and study rehabilitation for dancers. And that's kind of got me on the track. But then to try to really specialize in that, it would have taken me, years and years and years. And at that age, I felt that I didn't have any time. And I was told by the Dancer Transition Center here in Toronto of this method of exercise called Pilates in New York City. And my husband or boyfriend at that time was at Juilliard. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go down. He was at the Juilliard Theater School in New York. I'm going to go down and see what Pilates is all about. And I walked in, and back then, it was a little bit like a torture chamber. But the movements just really fascinated me. And it was something as a dancer that I could really relate to. And, strong emphasis on, just breathing and body awareness. So long story short, I was given a grant from the Dancer Transition Center, but on the condition that we actually came back to Toronto. On coming back to Toronto, a friend of mine was a physiotherapist and started to look at the moves, and it was determined that they were really quite high risk back then.
Yeah.
But when you look back now on physiotherapy back then in the late 80s, early 90s, it was quite different. We were still, back then there were studies coming out that instability, of the spine, did cause back pain. It wasn't proven really before then. And so we were really on the forefront of kind of evolving Pilates. And because we needed to establish credibility, it was very important that in the whole rehab and medical profession that we kept and we evolved the original Pilates method of exercise to be in keeping with, the physiotherapists' protocols. So we started to adapt. Robin McKenzie back then, Dr. Robin McKenzie came out with the protocol of more spinal extension for disc issues. So we evolved that. We put more extension into the earlier stages of Pilates at that point. And then Vleeming and Hodges and Hydes, these researchers came out with the whole, neutral alignment and the pelvis being neutral in order to, really be able to stabilize the lumbopelvic area. And then once you change the position of the pelvis, that completely changes the way you work the entire spine. So I think when you say what got you into sort of the rehab or post rehab, it was more that taking back a method of exercise, and as physiotherapy has done, evolve with the latest research, and then. We did get into, doing little videos for clients. And then other instructors started to see this approach and want to learn it. And my husband, being very entrepreneurial, said, okay, well, you know what? Maybe what we do is we get started filming it. So we started to do, make DVDs. And then he actually created one of the original metal pieces of equipment in the Pilates method of exercise, which is called the Reformer.
Yeah.
And he's 6'2" and I'm 5'0". And so we made it so that it could actually, if someone was very tall, would be able to feel the exercises in a similar way. So we got into the equipment business, and it was almost like one thing led to the other, to the point that, we really felt it was important that instructors out there were taught how to work with specific areas of clients and specific body types, and that they would never guess what they had to do, that we would always base everything on research. And so that when they were working with a client, they knew, well, because this attaches to this, let's do this with you. Because your body's like this, you're not like that. Let's evolve the exercises to you as opposed to, for the longest time, I think, people have been forced into exercises that, maybe aren't the best thing for them. So we've, long story short, we've always played both sides of the fence, kind of the post-rehab, taking people right back to, barely moving, right up to, the whole athletic conditioning where you're working far more globally with the entire muscular structure.
Yeah. Actually, this is very well known. And my next questions were about demystifying the body and making and allowing people to understand how their own body works. So, did you talk about how important it is for post-rehab clients to understand how their body works and how simple that body actually is?
Yes. Well, I think that depending on the injuries, but sometimes even just when you're not moving for a long period of time, the body adapts so quickly. It either atrophies, if you sit a lot, there's research now that our whole fascial system, it just gets set right in place there. And we need to bring awareness and integrate sort of the whole neuromuscular, neuroskeletal, and fascial system. And that takes awareness. And we find, breathing, there's so much research now on just breathing and getting people to sit, especially when they've just come out of, maybe a severe injury. Sit and breathe and just try to become aware of your inner, kind of your inner self, what you're thinking, how are you sitting, bring awareness to the body, and breathing helps you to kind of stop and take a moment to do that. So we'll start just by getting people to breathe and have an awareness of the breath. And then from there, as you start to move, just almost re-educating movement. And to do that, people need to move. And so, you put them through, depending on their ability or what their injury is. With Stott Pilates is our brand of Pilates. We start to reintegrate the functional. It's very important we reintegrate functional movement patterns. So we try to get people to be aware maybe of the dysfunction, what they are doing. Maybe, an example would be if you're sitting at your desk and, you slouch, right? Okay. And then if you try to get them to understand, all right, now get your pelvis in neutral and sit on top of the sit bones and just allow your spine to release, just even bringing that awareness of the difference, is an example, of people taking that first step to rehabilitation is knowing, what the faulty pattern is to then re-educate, a more beneficial movement pattern for them. So we start right back at the beginning, and then we go right into, once you've got that awareness, you need that inner structure. We're very global. We use our large muscles, but what happens is, and even the most fit athletes sometimes will lose that inner stability, our local stabilizers, those muscles that are very deep into, the joint. So we try to re-educate them and work outwards. And then now there's so much research on the whole fascial system, which kind of is like our body stocking that just kind of encompasses everything, skin right down into, the nerves and the joints. And so now we know, well, we need to move in certain ways to actually hydrate that. So, it's just a progression of steps. But it's so important along the way that, we re-educate our client, or re-educate ourselves in order to make a difference more quickly.
Right. Yes. No. Exactly. And I watched you one type of the inner structure, the core. More after I was going to ask you one question about brain injury, neurological disorders. Have you ever taught someone with or educated someone about brain injury clients or people with neurological disorders?
Yes, I mean, I'll tell you, we have trained a lot of instructors around the world. We also we've trained about 40,000 instructors now around the world, and we have an actual rehab, a Stott Pilates rehab program, where physical therapists train in Stott Pilates. And when it gets to, depending on the severity, we want to be very careful that instructors don't sometimes take on more than they should. So as far as, being able to,
right. Yeah.
It's very important that if someone has, a brain injury or an injury that, it's dealt with in the actual rehab situation first, right, by the physical therapist or the doctor. And then when they're ready to move on, they go to what we would refer to post-rehab. So we will have people that will specialize in different neurological disorders or brain injuries. And then from there, they can then be referred out to our instructors, and we will have some instructors that specialize more in athletic conditioning, active aging, or more neurological disorders, and then they will go on, they will be the ones that, would specialize in that to make sure, because we never want anybody to guess. I think, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
It's so important that you're not guessing that something is good for somebody, because you just never know. It might feel like it is.
Yeah.
And so we've always worked that when there's the research to show it, then we know, and we try to demystify that and simplify it as much as possible so that, patients or people that have had injuries can then go on to work with a regular fitness instructor, but still get the condition taken care of. So to answer your question, many years ago, yes, when I was teaching clients all the time, I did work with a few people that had either they were born, with a disability, or sometimes after a stroke. we will get, and then also neurological diseases, genetic diseases, that, Parkinson's. We have a number of people that are working with Parkinson's patients. And, the movement and exercise, that in itself is proven to be so beneficial no matter what you do, because even there's research out there that even the thought of going to exercise will make somebody feel better. So once they get there, so yes, I think that it's the more research that's coming out on mindfulness. And that's where our company spread and doesn't just do Pilates anymore, because there were so many other areas of mindfulness that we wanted to be able to work with. And so that's so important in any rehabilitation process is now, restoring those, the passages in the brain. Like, there's so much research now coming out about meditation and, how that actually has, can clear maybe pathways in the brain that could have been blocked somehow. And I'm not a specialist on that, but I just think that, any awareness. And that comes from the breath, and that's kind of, we keep going back to that. I sound like a bit of a broken record, but that helps us with the whole beginning of the rehab process.
It's actually that kind of, I would like to kind of meld. I have two questions I'd like to meld together. First thing is about I know focus. It's difficult a lot of times for people with brain injury to really focus, which actually ties in well to the importance of mindful movement and how important that mindful movement can play such a role in that, and being not necessarily focused, but mindful of the way your body moves, and how important that is to efficient and effective movement of the body. So you talk about how that mindful movement and focus kind of tie into even such things as important as core support, like this is a big question. I've listened to a very large question about your core and your mind mindful. But so just touch on mindfulness and the importance of being mindful or focused about just the way your body moves, and understanding how your body moves and feeling it, not necessarily understanding it, but feeling it more.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. I think, well, again, taking time to, like what our instructors will do, and specifically in Pilates, but other forms of mindful exercise, they will help, through breath. The breath really helps us also activate our core. Right? You can get people to connect more to their core if you actually help them to breathe efficiently. And that sort of creates that awareness. And, the core used to just be, this, hold on tight and grip, and that's what to say, right? And, but no, it's so important now that we support with our deep support system into the lumbopelvic area and through the entire spine, and bring awareness not just to that lower back area, but the core. Now we stem right up through the spine, through the thoracic area, and then it's very important also that the whole shoulder blade area, the whole shoulder scapula area is also moving efficiently, to then have the head be able to be supported on the spine. And then what's really important, and this gets back to bringing somebody back to a functional state, whether they're an athlete or working in a desk job all day, is that you need to obviously strengthen the legs, you need to stabilize the joints, and you need to strengthen the peripheral limbs, your arms. But if you don't have that core connection between the legs and the arms, you can't be as efficient as you could be. Like for an athlete, like a soccer player, if you didn't have the inner core strength, right? You go to try to kick that ball, and there's no way you're going to have the same amount of power as if you transferred the energy from the ground, right up through the core.
And
in order to exactly, because that power behind the movement, it's like we used to say, a tree, right? The trunk of a tree. If it's weak, the limbs don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And that's the simplest way to talk about the core. You can do all sorts of things to strengthen your arm and legs, but if you don't have a deep support system in your core, you probably will sustain more back issues, and you will not be as efficient as you could be in your sports, and you will probably get in time lower back, or not just lower back, but back pain and back instability and spinal issues. So core is important.
It is, yes. And I actually, well, thank you. This has been a great, actually, I was going to say, is this Pilates has helped me so much since I started taking it, which was much too late after my brain. I should have taken it earlier. My sister was encouraging me for a while after my brain injury. I never listened to her until 2012. And then I took it up, and it's been great. And yeah, the core support is just great for overall just movement. I know you'd think core support and brain injury doesn't necessarily go together, but it is just so important for just overall just movement, feeling ease of movement, not necessarily even like just strength of doing it, but comfort and knowing your body, knowing your arms are fine moving the way they move, and your legs are fine moving the way they move, and even separately or together, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either one. So.
Yeah, I think it's and for us too. Like if you look at when there's been a head injury, the tremendous stress also on the cervical area, and if you don't have that core support in order to sit up in a nice neutral position, right, then it's really hard to keep the head and cervical area in a nice released position. If you are scrunched over, or if you're not, supporting the core, you're going to take a lot more stress into that whole neck and shoulder area, and then that will contribute to the headaches and tension.
Exactly. It's exactly why I found Pilates to be so good for me, for my swimming, and for overall movement. I'm doing yoga now as well, but I started Pilates a long time before that. But it's been good for my swimming and my everything. I all mix. Well, I walk and I swim and I do Pilates, and it's been so good I just feel better by doing it. And
that's wonderful. So that's so great to hear. Great to hear.
Yeah. So it's been amazing. So I want to thank you so much for talking to us about this and about your course. And if you'd like to tell people how they can get in touch with Merrithew, or so your website is you can actually tell them what your website is and your Twitter, or the best way for people to get hold of you.
Sure. Yeah, well, basically, our website is www.merrithew.com, MERRITHEW, because it's always a hard one, .com. And thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Well, I enjoyed the discussion as well, so thank you so much. And I hope people take a lot away from this. So thanks to Wendy for listening, and thank you, Moira, for this great discussion.
Thanks.
I would once again like to thank Moira for an excellent discussion, and thank you for listening. As always, the music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound, www.bensound.com.